Hi, friends. Today we're going to look at our new book for this week. It's called Thunder Underground, and it's written by Jane Yolen. Now, this book is a little bit different than our other books that we normally read during the week. This is a book of poetry. So, this is not one continuous story, but rather a book of all different poems. These poems all have something in common, and they talk about things that happen underground. As you can see in this picture on the cover, you can see what's happening underground this tree. So, first, before we read some poems in this story, we're going to talk about what poetry is. Now, when I think of poetry, I think of words written together with rhyming words. And that is certainly true sometimes, but poetry or poems don't always have to have rhyming words. Poetry is a style of writing where writers can play with words. And really, poetry can be about anything. But the main purpose or the reason why authors choose to write poems is that they want to make a connection with the reader. And really, there are no rules, so you can make poems with whatever words you come up with. Okay, so we're going to first look at this first poem called Seeds. And I can already make a connection with this poem because we planted some seeds here at our house this weekend. So we're going to look at this poem, and I want you to think about the words that the author chose for this poem to just talk about seeds. Seeds, this dot, this spot, this period at the end of winter's sentence writes its way up through the dull slate of soil into the paragraph of spring. Really neat. So let's think about that real quick. This dot, this spot, does that help you think about a seed? Yeah, I see some seeds here growing underground, kind of like a dot, a spot. Kind of reminds you of a period at the end of a sentence because that's like a little dot. And then that period writes its way up, the sentence writes its way up through that soil and creates a plant. Now, think about this. And from the poem, how does the seed change from winter to spring? What do you think seeds are doing in the winter time when it's cold and there might be snow on the ground? Do you think seeds are growing underground? Hmm. They certainly might be doing something, but then we know what happens to the seeds when spring comes and the weather warms up and it's sunny. You really start to see the sprouts come out of the ground and flowers bloom and things grow. Okay, let's go to our next poem about something else that happens underground. Our next poem is called Velvet. And before we read that poem, I wanted to show you two pictures of what velvet looks like because you might not be familiar with that kind of material, but here are some pictures of velvet. So it's soft material that you might see dresses made out of, or pants, or curtains. So that's what velvet looks like. It's soft to the touch. So just to give you that background information, so when we read this next poem, you know what velvet looks like. Okay, so here's the poem Velvet. Take a second to look at the picture on this page to see what is happening underground. I see a family of bunnies underground. I also see a mole family and a family of worms. You see those worms down there? That's fun. And some things that are happening above ground with the plants growing and the person standing on the ground with the bunny. Okay, so let's read this poem called Velvet. And this poem starts off with a quote at the top, right up here, where those are words that somebody has said. It says, "Live like the velvet mole." And the person who said that, her name was Eleanor Wiley. Okay, our poem says, "Mole in his hole, the soft brown of old rubbed velvet, wrinkles up dirt through the night. Does he daydream of grass or the roots of grass? Does he listen to beetles passing? Does he count in his blind way the pink ribbony worms? Or are his thoughts dark and deep as velvet tunnels, velvet sleep? Very interesting. I love how this author used so many adjectives to describe what something looks like. So the mole was described as soft and brown, like old rubbed velvet. He also described about the pink ribbony worms. That really paints a picture in my mind of what the worms look like. And my question to you about velvet, what does the author think the mole might do throughout the night? What does the author think the mole might do throughout the night? Let's go back to our poem real quick because he talks about um, does he does he daydream of grass? Does he listen to the beetles passing? Think about that. If you're a mole and you're living underground, can you hear little beetles on the top of the ground scurrying around? And does he count in his blind way? You might know that moles can't either see very well or they're blind. Does he count the pink ribbony worms that might slide by underground near him? Or are the mole's thoughts just dark and deep as velvet tunnels? Does he sleep really soundly and he doesn't have many thoughts or many dreams? Okay, my last poem that we're going to read from this book today. This is a very different thing that happens underground, and this poem is called Subway. Have you ridden on the subway before? You might have been on the MARTA train in Atlanta, that's a subway, or maybe even in a bigger city like in New York City or some other city somewhere else that you might have ridden on the subway. So if you have ridden the subway before, this you might make a connection with this poem. Okay, here's Subway. I like the sound the subway makes deep in its underground den. I like the growling as it goes from street to street, and then I like the squeals its iron wheels make coming round again. I like the flickering lights below that make the nighttime day. I like the rumbling, jumbling cars along the long railway. I only wish that I could ride the subway trains all day. Okay. Did you hear any rhyming words in that poem? That is my question to you. The rhyming words in the poem. And then we're going to think about describing the subway from the author's perspective, from the author's point of view. So let's go back to our poem and see if we can find some rhyming words. So I do see the word den and then. Say those words, den, then. Those two rhyme. They both have the en at the end. What about the words? Oh, actually, I'm not going to tell you. Do you see some more rhyming words down in the second part of the poem? See if you can find them. What about day and railway? Say those. Day, railway. Do you hear those words? Those rhyme too. So those are some rhyming words. And like I said, poems can have rhyming words, but they don't necessarily have to have rhyming words. And then I want you to think about the author's point of view, how the author describes the subway. I like how the author says about the sound that the subway makes. I like the growling as it goes from street to street, the squeals of its iron wheels, the flickering of the lights, the rumbling, jumbling cars. It really makes me feel like I'm on the subway. The author used those special words to describe the subway and really makes me feel like I'm there. Okay, so we talked about those three poems. And what you're going to do in just a second, you are going to pick one of those poems to write about how the poem made you feel. So, words that suggest feeling, authors might write a poem and use certain words to make you feel a certain way. So, on this picture, we have a sun, and to describe the sun, the author might say, "The rays of sunshine burst into the room. The sun warmed the top of my head, and a smile spread across my face." When you hear those words describing the sun, how does that make you feel? It almost makes me feel like I'm standing in the sun and I feel the warmness of the sun, and it makes me feel so happy. So the author used these special words to make me feel that way. Now, with the snowflake, this author chose to write these words about the snowflake: stark, white, flakes, pound the night sky. Ooh. Stark white flakes pound the night sky. The word pound makes me think that the snow is coming down really hard, really fast. So these words make me think that it's really cold outside, and it's almost like a blizzard because the snow's coming down so hard. That might make me very excited that it's snowing that hard, or it could make me feel really cold inside and um, maybe getting ready to light a fire in my house to stay warm. So poets write these words to connect with their readers. One way they do this is by making us feel with the words they choose. So what you're going to do now, friends, is on your plans for today, you are going to print out this page. So you are going to pick one of the poems we just read. So we read the poem Seeds, Velvet, and Subway. So I want you to choose one of those poems and write the title of the poem right here next to the word poem. Then I want you to pick out the words in the poem that helped you to feel a certain way. Then you're going to write your feelings next to those words. How did those words make you feel in the poem? I've also attached the words to the poem in your plans for today in case you want to go back and look at each poem and really pick out those words that helped you to feel a certain way. Thank you for listening, and we will come back later on this week and read some more poems from our book, Thunder Underground.